Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 183 of the world's longest tenured Denver Nuggets spin-off podcast. Welcome to the DNVR Nuggets' Serbian Corner. My name is Miroslav Cuk, and before we begin, please take a moment to like the video on YouTube, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the DNVR Sports YouTube channel and DNVR Nuggets podcast channel. The audio version is ideal for your commute or to make your office or home office time more bearable. If you want to support the show more directly, you can become a Patreon supporter at patreon.com/MiroslavCuk, just like my Seco tier supporters Daniel Lynch and Brian Johnson. This is the perfect time to join Patreon, as you will be supporting the Miro Does Denver Volume 3 trip, as well as I plan to land in Colorado in exactly 4 weeks. Patreon supporters can enjoy the ad-free audio version of this show. They can also submit ideas for guests and topics and appear on the show during the summer. The week behind us started in the crypt in Los Angeles. The Lakers had all of their horses, including LeBron James, which was a cause for optimism for the Nuggets, considering how poorly Luka, Reeves, and LeBron have looked together so far this season, or before that game anyway. Alas, the game started poorly for the Nuggets, mostly because the Lakers were leaving them wide open from the outside, and the guest team was just missing jumpers. Jamal scored 5 points early in the game, but then missed 13 consecutive field goal attempts and stayed at the 5-point mark for the rest of the game. Meanwhile, the Lakers made 6 out of their first 13 3-point attempts and had an 8-point lead at the first break. The second quarter started with Jamal, Cam Johnson stagger with Jonas Valanciunas at the 5. Those 3 minutes went so poorly that Jonas never returned to the game. -8 in 3 minutes can be cited as one of the causes for the final outcome of the game. Denver went to micro-ball with Spencer Jones at the 5, and after Joker returned, managed to reduce the deficit to 11 points at the big break. In the third quarter, Jamal committed his 4th foul early, was subbed out, and Denver used the minutes without him to get completely back and tied the game before the last break. All of Joker, Tim Hardaway Jr., Gordon, Cam Johnson, and Bruce Brown scored efficiently in this period. The Nuggets played well in the fourth, had an 8-point lead with 4 minutes to go, then had a 2-point lead and 2 free throws with 10 seconds to go, a 3-point lead with 6 seconds to go. The Lakers didn't have a timeout, so they had to inbound under their own basket. However, the Nuggets still somehow found a way to let the game go to overtime after Austin Reeves intentionally missed a free throw and put the ball back in the rim. In overtime, Jamal Murray fouled out. Both teams were missing shots in bunches, and it was a tie game with 15 seconds to go, and the Lakers had possession. The Nuggets defended the possession, didn't use the foul they had to give, and Luka Doncic drained a 15-foot fadeaway over Spencer Jones for the win. Confession time. I did not watch this game live, and it took me 3 days to watch all 4 quarters and overtime of this game. That's how unenthusiastic I was about it. 3 days later, the Hospital 76ers came to town. No Embiid. Well, duh, they played in Denver. This is not a 2019 or 2016. No Maxey, no Paul George, and no Kelly Oubre, if that matters for anything. The Nuggets had all their horses but Peyton Watson, and they also had all the shooting luck in this one. The good guys made 9 out of 17 shots from the outside in the first half compared to Philly's 4 of 24. That created a 32-point cushion, so the rest of the game was a formality. We can talk about Christian Brown's 22 points, Cam Johnson's 18 points, or Joker's 14 assists. For me, the most important stat of that game was that none of the starters played for more than 27 minutes on a first night of a back-to-back, and it was nice to get an easy win. Alas, last night, just 20 hours later, the 2023 NBA champions were already at the FedEx Forum in Memphis, Tennessee. The Grizzlies were without 7 players, including Ja Morant, Zach Edey, our old friend KCP, Santi Aldama, and Brandon Clark, who has been more of a theoretical player over the last few years. That allowed them to lose 8 games in a row while jockeying for the top pick this summer. The Nuggets were resting Aaron Gordon while Peter Watson was still on his prolonged absence after his hamstring injury. This was a game where the guest team had to do their work early and not let the borderline G League squad get into the rhythm. However, much of the front office is trying to punt on the games. The players will always try to look good on the court, especially at the end of bench guys, since they're fighting for their NBA lives. The home team managed to force a lot of turnovers in this game, which caused a tied game result at the half. And while the sleep deprivation-related fatigue was kicking in with the visitors, that catalyzed a great third quarter for Memphis. Denver entered the fourth quarter down 8 points and never caught up with the Grizzlies again. Joker was 1 assist short of an infamous quadruple-double after committing 10 turnovers. All of CB, Cam Johnson, Jamal Murray, and Tim Hardaway were scoring points, but it wasn't enough after turning the ball over 19 times. Considering how late in the season it was and what the seeding stakes were, this was the worst loss of the season so far, but there's room to get a worse one down the stretch, he said, hoping to reverse jinx the team. Okay, that will do for foreplay. Let's get down to business. And by the way, Bill Simmons, I know you're listening to the show. I heard you stole my foreplay bit on your last show. I'm just saying. My guest for today is the tallest Nuggets media person who does not work at Altitude TV since Scott Hastings exists. He is also the only Nuggets media person ever to hit a Sombor shuffle in Sombor. He is also the only Nuggets media person to ever make an audio documentary when he published Thrill, Will Barton's Life in Basketball in October 2018. He's my fellow Beatles enjoyer and my fellow guitar player. From Broomfield, Colorado, it's, as my boy Mark Stein would say, Adam Mares.
Stein does get the record for saying my name the best. You are correct, but you gave a valiant effort there, Miroslav.
Yeah, I always the R in Mares. It's always to me somewhere halfway between D and R.
Exactly.
I cannot do it.
It's fine. You gave
Mares.
I can't say it. I can't even say Nicola's name correctly. So it's okay.
It's a tie, I guess. It's a tie.
It's a tie.
So, Adam, the fan base is crashing out. Look at me.
Myself included.
I'm using modern technology, terminology, crashing out. 6-7. Anyway, the fan base has every right to feel awful after this last loss to Memphis, but also after being just 9-13 against the teams I deem top-level teams in this league. The third seed looks almost impossible at this moment, with Luka and the Lakers playing their best basketball while the Nuggets are stuttering like a guy after having a liter of rakia on an empty stomach. It's easy to bury the Nuggets right now. Everybody outside of Denver who cares enough to still mention them kind of did after last night. You and I, Adam, we are not giving up just yet. Let's take the engineering approach and see what can be fixed still with this team that looks broken right now. How do you feel after last night?
Last night, definitely was my first crash out of the season. I think a lot of people, I think I was a long holdout. Last night was discouraging, and I'll tell you why. I was thinking about this, I try to always be reflective about my perspective because I, of course, always say that I am a biased media member. I come to this from a point of first person. And I think sports are supposed to be that way. I've always said I think you're supposed to feel sports, not just like think them. You're supposed to feel them. So if you remove the feeling part of it, you actually don't really connect with sports. But there are obviously some drawbacks to that. And one of them can be you can be too close to a situation. It can cloud your judgment. So anytime I have like a strong take, and last night I had some strong takes, I always try to think about, okay, well, where's your bias coming in? But here's the core of why I felt so discouraged by last night's loss, and not about the ones that came before it that were pretty similar, is that to me, this was the moment of the season where Denver had to get serious, had to get focused. They wait to the last end of the year often. They've done this a lot where it's been very late that they kind of get things going. But I always say that there's 3 boxes you have to check. There is the talent box, which I think they have checked, the connection box, which is understandably not checked because the guys have been out so much this year. But there's also just this, how tough are you as a team? And last night, and really in the lead up to it, there's so much talk, from the Nuggets about we're actually playing well. We're losing, but we're playing well. We're getting better. And, the schedule has been this and the schedule's been that. And I look at it and I'm thinking, like, some of this is acceptable to a degree. There's some truth in all of that. But there's this part of it which is you have to win tough games. You have to overcome tough situations because when you get to the playoffs, it's all tough. Every game, every quarter is tough. And the Nuggets giving the level of effort and focus that they had in that one last night to me was, yes, I know you got in at 5:30 in the morning. I know you did all these things, but that was such a not resilient effort from the Nuggets that it was so discouraging for me to look and say, well, now there's 12 games left for them to prove that they have the requisite toughness on top of building connection to be the team I think they can be. And last night was the first time I felt like I'm not sure I would bet on them being tough enough. That was a pretty not tough effort from everybody, including Nikola Jokic.
And it wasn't just the Nuggets fans who were mad last night. I can imagine people in Memphis front office were mad as well. Like, they did everything right to tank that game. And somehow the Nuggets found a way to snap their 8-game losing streak. It's not just, yes, I read so much about the sleep deprivation the Nuggets have faced last night, which is true, which is something that can be scientifically explained. But at the same time, the difference in talent between two teams was so massive. It's like, I don't know what to compare it to, honestly. Like it's a team that is supposed to be a championship contender playing against the team who's doing their worst to lose the game. And that is not something that has been happening a lot to other contenders. You follow the whole league around. There are at least 5 or 6 teams, or maybe a bit less than that, maybe at least 3 or 4 teams that are just not accepting those kind of performances.
Well, that's the thing that I compared last night is when I watch a team like Boston, they have an entire season's worth of work that shows that they are mentally the type of team it takes to win a championship. They have that resiliency, discipline, all of these traits that are essential. They have 60 examples of it this year, but really they have at least 10 to 15 of them that are like, okay, they overcame something major. You go to the Oklahoma City Thunder, San Antonio Spurs. There's just a lot. I watch these teams, and that's one of the things that sticks out to me is I'm like, man, this team is tough-minded. You really can't break their will. They're going to keep battling no matter the circumstances. And Denver just has had too many that now you're up against it where I say Denver can play great the rest of the year and overcome. There's certainly things they're having to overcome right now. Jamal Murray doesn't look healthy. They're clearly exhausted. The schedule has been tough on them. There are things that they are dealing with, but it's not comparable to say that they are handling it with the same level of toughness as some of these other top teams. So now the only thing we have left to hang our hat on is, well, they'll figure it out here at the end, or they can just turn it on when it matters, which, by the way, has been true in the past. They have put it together and snapped their fingers into place. So maybe that'll happen here, but there's something that just doesn't sit right with me with a team that loses games like that when the stakes are what they were.
Okay, so the last thing I wanted to ask you before we trying to turn the page and look for the silver linings here. There have been clues about the Nuggets not being contenders 2 seasons ago. There have been clues a season ago, and there are obviously some clues now. How would you compare those 3 types of clues? Meaning, we obviously know what was the outcome of the previous 2 seasons, and how would you compare it to this season's? And does that make you more or less optimistic than a year or 2 years ago?
Well, first
if you
of all,
can remember.
Yeah.
I know you don't remember a lot of things.
I don't remember a lot of things. It's my blessing and a curse. No, I can take us to last year, which is that I just saw no exit for the Nuggets.
Yeah.
I mean, last year was the most hopeless season I felt like in large part because talent is the one thing you can't change. And you go into a season, you never know what your talent is on a roster because guys emerge, and all of a sudden you're like, hey, that was a player we didn't expect, and now there's enough guys or somebody makes a leap. And so last year when nobody made a leap, you looked at it and thought, okay, it's going to be tough. It was so dysfunctional. I knew, what was going on behind the scenes, even more so than whatever made it in front. And I just thought, man, there's no way this gets turned around. And it did to a degree that I did not expect. Now, I think Denver reached close to the top end of their outcomes last year, and that's encouraging. This year, it's discouraging because I think the Nuggets' ceiling is just so much higher, and the injuries are what they are. I'm not mad at the Nuggets for not being a top 2 seed, but there is something to how Denver has approached certain dynamics with the team this year that are concerning because the talent is there, but now the question is, how is it going to get tapped here over this final bit? Connection is hard to build. Are they going to be able to build that? And then there's major questions about just the leadership and structure of the organization at the moment that, those are the questions that were never going to be answered to the playoffs. And here we are in the regular season, and we have questions about who's in charge of the room. Who is the team that doesn't stand for losses like this? Because the Nuggets have stood for a lot of losses lately and come out and said, we're actually playing well. Even if that's true to me, it's a message that reads like, yeah, but that was never the goal. The goal was never to be competitive and tough losses against other competitive teams. The goal was this is a championship team, and it's hard to accept that they haven't looked like that for 3 months, and, it's just circumstantial.
This is a tangent, but I have to ask you because you know David Adelman for many years. What does it say about him? What does he thinks the media appearances are for? Is it to be frank? Is it to be transparent? Or is it to create some sort of narrative around the team that is supposed to be good for the team going forward?
What's interesting to me of being around the league is how people who are like David Adelman, lifers in the NBA, I don't think they have a healthy, I don't think they're reflective about what the media is. I don't think they care. They've only ever experienced it from one side. So I don't know that he thinks about what am I supposed to go into a presser and say. I think Michael Malone was very thoughtful in that way. He was very politically savvy, and that includes how do I interact with the media. I think with David Adelman, he is thoughtful in his responses in revealing in how he thinks. And I don't know if that's intentional or not, but what I mean by that is David Adelman thinks about the X's and O's of the game, and I think very little else. And when he speaks to the media, and when he says things like we're trending in the right directions, I think what he's saying is the part of basketball that gets all of my attention is tracking well. And there's something to it, but it's also scary because you think, well, there's parts of this team that are not trending well. Things like this toughness and leadership void and those types of things that it makes me worry he just isn't considering those things as much as I think they should be considered. But you know what? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm over-indexing on it. And it really is about, no, the team is learning things about themselves that will be useful in the playoffs, and the playoffs will just be a completely different team.
Okay, let's take a short break. And after that, we are going to continue dissecting this team. Don't go anywhere. So, Adam, I already said that I will not say any bad things about the team. Well, I pulled LeBron. I lied. The team doesn't look like they're playing together. Not all the players, in my mind, have the same agendas. Joker, Jamal, Aaron, and Christian are all taken care of long term. I mean, Joker's contract expires in 2027, but I don't think there's going to be more than 5 minutes between the time he can sign the Supermax extension and the time he actually signs it. Other than them, and I guess Zeke Naji, who is on what feels like a lifetime contract with the Nuggets, all the guys are either expiring in 2027 or this summer. What can be done for those guys? And I mostly think of Peyton Watson here, to be willing to sacrifice as much as is needed for the squad to reach its apex in the playoffs.
From Peyton Watson?
Peyton and the other guys who are expiring and maybe thinking more about their numbers than what they're supposed to do to help the team maximally.
The big thing is Peyton Watson has to come back and be healthy. He has had a hamstring injury before, if you recall, coming into the season last year. It actually was very costly because he had to miss all of camp, and I think it stunted his opportunities throughout the whole part of the year. But he came back and didn't deal with it again, which is encouraging. That maybe he's young enough that his body can bounce back from this in a way that's non-recurring. And he certainly took his time coming back. I mean, he's at the high end of what was expected for his return. And oh, by the way, still not back. I mean, it would have been nice to have him last night. I think it would have been an injection into the team. I'm not sure he's going to be back on Friday. It's possible it'll be all the way till Sunday, and we'll see. But number one, the team needs his focus on the defensive end. And this is tough because he was having such a great offensive season, and he's in a contract year. And by the way, I think all of this stuff, and I'm not saying that he's not back yet because of the contract or anything like that. I don't think that is the case, but you have to imagine it at least is in the air. It's at least part of this of like, well, I'm up for a big contract. I'm not going to tear my hamstring rushing back from this. Like I don't have any money in my, no long-term money secured. So there's some aspect of that, but I just think he has to come back and be his best defensive self. And then he has the hardest, in my opinion, of all the guys that have missed time and come back, he has the hardest return because he both has to focus on the defensive end to a level that he probably hadn't all year. He's been asked to be a two-way player. But at the same time, he has to adjust his role for the minutes he's going to be playing, which is to say when he's around Nikola, he needs to probably just play within the system. And when he's not, he needs to be aggressive and help out that second unit, which desperately needs it. So I think he has a lot of things he has to offer. I think he is probably the sixth most important player on the roster. And his return, as much as anything, is going to be a process for the Nuggets to reach their full potential.
I'm not trying to be too hot takey right now, but we are talking about a literal hundred of millions of dollars that it's at stake with Peyton, as you mentioned. If he would get injured, God forbid, in the last part of the season, he could be forced to sign a 1-year deal with the Nuggets or somebody else instead of signing a 8-figure contract with somebody for 4 or 5 years. So that's a big thing to think of. And one of the things I was really nervous about at the beginning of the season when we discovered he is not getting that extension, is it fair to talk about the ownership and front office not being willing to invest in this team that was, by everybody thinks this is the best Nuggets roster of all time, that they've inserted this little nugget of uncertainty by not offering Peyton the deal he wanted at the beginning of the season.
I think this is easy to say in hindsight. I don't think the team would have been wise to have just paid a bunch of money this summer and committed yourself. We could be sitting here, talking about how Denver has no flexibility going forward for years and years, and they committed to these guys, and Peyton didn't make a leap, and Christian Stroud. Like there's an alternate world where it all seems obvious now because Peyton has played so great. To me, the real mistakes were sown back really in 2022 when Tim Conley left, and I think there was a sense of, well, we don't need this guy, which maybe it was true in a certain way. Like I think that there are other guys that could have done that job, but I think it was a hint at how the organization views this, which is we got it. And I think that there is a level, I don't want to say of arrogance. Well, it is a little bit of arrogance. The Kroenkes have had a lot of success in a row. Rams, Avs, Nuggets. And I think there's a natural feeling you get when you do that, when you pull that off of like, we now have all the answers. We saw Joe Lacob, when they win their championships, we're light years ahead. There's this inflation that happens when you've created billions of dollars and won at the level of everything. It's like, yeah, I guess I know everything. And I think there's a level of ownership of, hey, I think we know everything. When the last handful of years have been a humbling of, hey, this is all precarious. And the difference between a dynasty and a one and done is razor thin. And I think the Nuggets are dealing with some of that. So the Peyton question to me, it's not about the cheapness of the summer. It's about what had been happening for the last 3 years, that the pot of water that was boiling that nobody noticed until it boiled over. And this summer was about paying the debt on those.
That is very true. And I have nothing to add, really. It's so circumstantial. When people ask, why is this guy paid this much and the other guy is paid that much? It's all circumstances. It's what that player's value is at that particular moment in time, and not before and not after that. And there's no revising NBA contracts. All the contracts are guaranteed. And sometimes guys are getting squeezed out of every dollar, like Spencer Jones this year. I already mentioned I wouldn't be surprised if Spencer Jones was praying not to be re-signed by the Nuggets after the dollar squeezing he's been experiencing, especially in the past month.
Is he experiencing a dollar squeezing though?
I mean,
here's the thing. Here's the thing. I look at both with him. Like with Peyton Watson, the Nuggets drafted him in the first round, 30th. Nobody else was going to take him. If it weren't for that, he would not have had a guaranteed contract right out of the gate. And so there's a level of, since then, I think there's been things that have hampered his career. But at the same time, he's in a position to make a lot of money in large part because of that. With Spencer Jones, there's something similar. He came through this two-way process. And what would Denver have offered him? I mean, we're talking about a very minuscule amount of money from the Kroenkes, but it was more about the flexibility they had with the CBA, with the second apron. So that was what they were up against. I don't think it was a matter of being cheap. And now the Nuggets get into a spot, and Spencer Jones will find him in a spot where this new CBA does not pay the Spencer Joneses of the world.
Yeah.
And so he might end up making slightly more money, and the Denver might retain him for that slightly more money. I just don't know if Denver is doing him dirty or being cheap. I think they were trying to be smart about their extended years. The real dumb moves were the moves that were made in the previous years, like giving Zeke Naji a huge contract and giving Hunter Tyson and all these other guys contracts that put you in the spot that you're in. But as far as not offering him money, 4 weeks ago, to me that's not a story.
Yeah, and again, it's about what happens at the moment when the contract is being signed. The team is gonna sign a player on what makes sense for them, and there's not a lot of emotions involved in all of that. I'm just trying to view the same thing from the prism of a small man in this case, Spencer Jones, who is a foot taller than me. Okay, let's now go to the silver linings. We both feel this is not the end, even though it felt really bad last night. And there are several reasons why we still have something to cling on and think this is not the end. First of all, let's start with Jamal Murray. Jamal Murray, he's having by far the best season of his career so far. If you had to distill it into three things he's doing better than ever, what would those things be?
For who is this? For
Jamal.
For Jamal? Man, the three things that he's doing better. I mean, he's shooting the ball extremely well, and he's getting to his shot very well, and I think that's a big deal. I think it's underrated that the volume of threes he can take is changes the game. He's clearly in better shape. I think that's one of them. Is he's just quicker and looks faster and more spry. I'm not sure beyond that what I would add to it. His defense has fallen off. I thought there were moments his defense was really good at portions of the season. I don't think it has been lately. Maybe that's a fatigue question. But I just think it's the combination of his shooting and his ability to attack guys with a little bit more quickness is really what's made this season different.
Yeah, Jamal, I think he's still at 25, 26 points per game, by far the most of his career. Last 15 games, and that also coincides with Joker returning and with him getting more fatigued than before. He's now down to 23 points in the last 15 games. The Nuggets are, by the way, 7-8 those 15 games. It's not a small sample. And let me see, his shooting numbers are fine. His field goal percentage did drop to 45, but his 3-point percentage is still above 41. So how do you feel about his fatigue going into the playoffs, and how concerned are you about it?
Well, I think part of what's happened with Jamal since Jokic came back is that he exerted himself quite a bit to keep the team afloat. And I think there was a conscious, not like I'm worn down, but a conscious of I just used a lot of reserves. Let me kind of sit back. And it's understandable to some degree. I don't think he was playing as hard or as well as he was prior to that. And the team has suffered a little bit from it. But at the same time, he knows his body well to a certain extent. The biggest concern I have for Jamal right now is not necessarily fatigue, including mental fatigue, because I think all these guys, they've said as much in years past that I think the regular season bores them a little bit. They've been through so many of them, and they've been through these ups and downs, and they just know that the playoffs are such a different beast. I think Jamal has been there for a while mentally, but what worries me now is his shoulder injury. It seems like it's really bothering him. I think it's part of why he's less aggressive. He's reaching for it all the time. And Denver, unfortunately, here's one take I have. I'm curious if last night's loss shifts Denver's attention at all. Because winning last night, you're still within striking distance of that 3 seed. You have a motivation for it. Who knows how things shake out? Now you kind of don't. You're really 4 games behind the Lakers in the loss column because you have to overtake them, not just tie them. So you're 4 games back with 12 to go. You're almost certainly not going to catch them. And I wonder if it makes Denver wonder, do we care if we're 4, 5, or 6 now? If we're not going to be 3, which would have been a really healthy position, does it matter where we fall in that standings? Is it better just to have Jamal and Jokic rested, healthy, and whatever it is we have to do to get our team ready for that? I'm curious if that shifts things at all. I don't know if I personally feel better if they're a 4 seed but exhausted and banged up versus a 6 seed, but Jamal was able to get the rest he needs and they were able to tinker with the things they need. Maybe that shifts priorities, but Murray's shoulder injury is definitely a concern.
Okay, let's take another break, and I want to continue on that theme. So don't go anywhere. So you mentioned possibly resting Jamal and Nikola down the stretch because seeds between 4 and 6 might not matter. I actually agree with that because seeds, if you don't have a home court advantage, and if you're a 4 seed, you basically do have that one series of home court advantage. It's not a big one, especially because you're going to play against practically the same team you are, or at least have been during the regular season. I do have this very personal reason why I want the Nuggets to stay the 4th seed, because I will be in Denver for the first 3 games. And if the first 2 games are in Denver, that's a better package for me than if not. But do you think Joker would agree with that? Not playing a couple or 3 or 4 games down the stretch to get more rest? Is it something you can see him agreeing to?
No, in large part, I just don't think it's how he's wired. I do think he's wired to play, but I also wonder if, there are incentives in his contract. Nobody ever gets to know what those incentives are, and I do wonder if the 65-game rule or All NBA or these things have little bonuses to them that are just given. They're considered likely bonuses because, of course, we think Jokic will be a first or second team All NBA player always. But if he misses that rule and he's ineligible, maybe it triggers something in his salary. So it's possible there are those types of things. But I think more than anything, Nikola just views his job as playing basketball, which I appreciate about him very much.
Let's now talk about his end to the season. Do you have more or fewer questions about Joker going into this playoffs compared to the last 3?
Probably more, to be honest. And part of this has to do with mentally, where he's at. His beef with the officials lately has been driving me nuts. And it's funny because I think he has a legitimate case. It's just, to me, it's like fighting against the weather. Like the officiating is what it is in this league. I mean, they've kind of unofficially made it so that there's this contact that's just allowed with him. And he's been fighting this battle for 12 years. There's no progress made. At a certain point, you say, okay, what do I need? A tactical retreat here to sort of get what I need? And his inability to overcome that, to me, seems to hint at something concerning because it makes me wonder, how is he going to be in the postseason? My most embarrassed, rooting for Jokic's been such a joy. One of the few times I've been embarrassed was when he just went all over the Suns after getting swept by Phoenix and just started going off, because to me it felt like the wrong kind of frustration. Like, okay, now you're getting thrown out of a game after getting swept because they got to you and this or that. And to me, that's just what I've seen from Nikola so much lately, is that frustration of like, dang it, man, our guy is kind of cracking under the pressure right now that teams are throwing at him and officials are throwing at him.
And I have to support your story from another angle, and that's his 2-hour interview with Edin Avdic a couple of weeks ago. I have to tell you, man, like, we both watched it very carefully. You had the translation that's kind of limiting your experience with it, but I'm gonna tell you, man, it looked like he wanted that interview because he wanted to take some stuff off his chest. And by the way, most of it was frustration. Most of it was frustration by the fans, frustration by the former NBA players, stuff like that. And yeah, sure, he had some nice stories to tell too, but I did feel like he was a bit agitated a bit. Yeah, it was during his injury recovery, which makes sense. Maybe he was just bored and wanted to do something. He felt it would be fun. But I do agree there's some restlessness to him this season that is more pronounced than in previous seasons. And yeah, I don't know. We usually say that he has almost a perfect playoff record individually, but that's not really true. Like he's had his struggles in 2020, in 2021, in 2022, not so much in 2023, but there are some things that can rattle him. And one of the things he talked about, and you pointed it out really well from the interview, is when he was talking about curveballs the other teams are throwing at them, and playing guards as his defenders really are really getting into his head. He just hates the fact that those little guys can do whatever they want to him, and he still hasn't found a way to overcome it. Are you optimistic that he's hiding something from us that he's saving for the playoffs, or do you think that just might be the story of another playoffs?
Well, first of all, I do think try to hide something from him because he figures everything out. I think that if I was another coach, that's exactly what I would be doing. And I think teams are doing it. I've talked about how I think that teams like Oklahoma City and San Antonio have perhaps intentionally not played with some of their bigs just to say, hey, we want an opportunity to look at something that doesn't necessarily show our hand. So I do think that teams are going to throw some stuff at the Nuggets this year that are different from what they've seen. How he handles that will go a long way. But I do think there's stuff Denver is also hiding up their sleeve. And one of them, David Adelman told us about very early, and it was very noticeable last night, not playing through Jokic in the post to preserve his body. Denver could have won that game in the post last night alone. And part of me was frustrated with Nikola because for 3/4 of the game, he's playing the passing game and he's kind of out on the perimeter. And then late in the game when they're trying to come back, you could see how easy it was for him to get into the post and just get buckets. And you sit there and think, well, this could have been a win if you would have just done that. The team's being strategic about not going to that. But Denver dominates when they go through him in the post, and they just are holding that back in a way that I have to imagine is going to come out later on in the year.
I cannot tell you the level of my frustration every time he decides not to take a floater and instead sends the pass to the corner three for Christian Braun. Like, come on, man. Like, the math better than I do. Like, there's no way this is what you think you're supposed to do, but you are forcing it because you're trying to generate something that might be helpful going forward, but it might not. Like, Christian is a guy who is he's thinking a lot about his game, and he is purposely cutting out the fat out of his game to try to be more efficient. Do you see Christian as a starter or as a closer as a problem in these playoffs comparably to last season's?
He's near the top of my concerns for sure, just because I think a lot of it is going to come down to just his shooting. I mean, you get games like last night where he scores all these points. I mean, they're on fast breaks and cuts, and those just aren't going to be available. And we've seen in games where those aren't available, his offensive production can be a little bit more limited. Denver's offense in general, I feel this year has been less dynamic, and maybe that's because of all the injuries. But there are games when they play good teams where Christian is sending that same split cut and slip over and over again, and it's just not even close to open. And you keep thinking, you're running that for the 30th time today. You have 4 points. Like, is there any other wrinkle that you could throw out there? And so I'm definitely worried that a lot of big playoff moments are going to come down to Christian Braun wide open, and the right play is going to be to get him the ball. And a lot of the Nuggets' success will be whether or not he hits them. And I just don't know that he's the type of guy that is the talent to do that or the confidence to do that when the game's on the line.
So Christian is one of the 4 guys that are right beneath the big 3 of the Nuggets, together with Cam Johnson, Peyton Watson, and Spencer Jones, I think. How would you rank those 4 guys when you think about who you trust the most in a playoff environment?
Spencer,
Spencer, Cam, Peyton, and Christian.
Man, this one's really, really interesting because trust, it's relative to their own output. Like, I think Cam Johnson is very skilled. So even if I trust him less, the outcome is higher because his skill level is higher. So I think I would go number one with him. He's really impressed me. Even in this last game, he seemed like the only guy that really cared and, was playing hard. I think he's figuring things out. And this is the first time in a while that I felt optimistic about him figuring it out. So I think he would be number one. Peyton probably would have been number one if it weren't for this injury. This injury is really untimely. And how well he comes back from it is going to be a major question. I'd like to put him number two. Christian, I think, is more consistent, but I'm worried that his skill set is lacking. And then Spencer Jones is, to me, is like the lowest floor guy. We saw last night, that he has limitations to his game, that if you're counting on him for too much, I think you're in trouble. But I also think that he can be like the most consistent of the guys in terms of doing the thing that he does. So this question is almost tough because it's not that they're all being graded on the same scale, so it's hard to like sort of account for all of that. But Cam probably would be the one I would say number one for me, just because he can do a lot of different things.
Yeah. I'm the guy I'm least worried about is Cam Johnson, even though we cannot say he's had a perfect season so far, but at least that he knows what he's doing on defense all the time, and on offense he's getting there. He's getting into better spots than what he was doing.
I think I'm less worried that he's going to choke open threes, which is where we were at, I think, for parts of the season. Is he going to turn into Christian Brown in the playoffs?
We are talking about the best 3-point shooting team in the league, and now we are just watching a bunch of chokers left and right.
Well, I think Cam, to your point, I am pretty optimistic about Cam, but these last games will really tell the story, so I'm kind of curious for it.
Yeah, let's go back to David Adelman, and we had a really good comment from our guy Mike Olson. Let me just try to find it where it is. Oh, I'm such a bad producer. This is horrible. This is absolutely horrible. Well, to be fair, there is a lot of comments today.
Oh man.
So basically, I cannot pull it out because I'm too old. But basically, what Mike asked is, if Adelman is not gonna pull the whip out, who's gonna this season? How confident are you that we are gonna see? What did we see last year actually from David Adelman when it comes to playoffs? Because nobody had any time to think about what they're supposed to do. They were just doing stuff, and David Adelman introduced some of the wrinkles like the zone defense into the playoff scheme. But other than that, we cannot say that he was the guy who was pumping up the guys to get to 2 long 7-game series.
The thing is I just don't know that Adelman has that sense to him. He is like a guy who maybe has have you ever seen this where maybe somebody is blind, but they have like really super hearing, like their other senses get sharpened or heightened around it. That's how I feel Adelman is with his basketball acumen. I think that he is a guy that really understands X's and O's, but is probably a little socially blind to some of these other areas. So I don't think it's from a lack of trying or fear of disrupting or this or that. I just don't think his brain is wired for those types of things. So for him doing it, I don't know that he even senses when or how, but certainly I don't know if he would pull it off. So I don't expect him to crack the whip, so to speak. And I think he had talked about this when he took the job, that that's not who he is, that this team has to police themselves. The question for me then is, if not him, then who is it? And this is the thing about Jokic that I think, as we've watched him all these years, he is so near perfect. He really is in so many ways. But everybody has these deficiencies. And one of his that we just are run into over and over again is I don't think he's that guy either. And if your coach isn't that guy and your star player isn't that guy, it becomes difficult to know who the other person is that can step into that role.
You mentioned somebody who goes blind and then his senses go up. Our guy Jeff Morton has a great analogy for David Adelman. He said he's like your buddy when you're hanging out and somebody tells a joke. He's the guy who's going to say, that's funny, but he won't laugh. That's Jeff's description of what David Adelman is. But are we asking too much of Joker? like, does he have to be the emotional and the whip out leader on top of being the guy who produces the most and every possession relies on him? Or is it just the heavy is the crown of the man who has to wear it?
To me, I don't think we're asking too much. We're asking too much, and if you say, is it reasonable, or should we expect it? I mean, no. But the truth is, we shouldn't reasonably expect the anyone to become the greatest player of all time. To me, it's like Jokic is so talented that everything now has high stakes because of how talented he is. So LeBron has gone through all the great players have gone through this, where it's like, well, he did this, and this, but you're upset because he didn't do this. And it's like, well, yeah, because he's that good. Now all boxes are on the table to be checked. And I think with Nikola, it's just, the more I go through life, the more I think this is true, that you will always rise to the level of what you can't do. And, this is the Peter principle. Only the Peter principle says you rise to your level of incompetence. You keep getting promoted until you get into a job you actually suck at. And I think this is true of great athletes as well, in that you just keep elevating until ultimately you're at the stage where it's like, well, what can't you do? Because that's the last thing you have to do. That's part of what makes sports poetic and exciting, is there is levels of leadership we've seen from Nikola, including this year. He has been vocal. He does you can tell when he's the emotional weight to the team, and he brings it, and you can just feel it. He doesn't seem to have the energy for that every night. And over the last month, he's been in this personal battle with the officials that I think has taken him out of that.
Okay, let's take our last break. And after that, I wanted to play a hopefully fun game. So don't go anywhere. So, Adam, as I mentioned, I want optimism on this show. I'm not sure how much optimism we've conveyed so far. I think we are out of crashing out from last night, and hopefully, what is the thing, or if you can say it's one thing, that gives you the most optimism going forward? Is it just the experience, the fact that the group up top knows each other, by heart, or maybe is there maybe something else there?
I mean, it's two things. It's one, historical precedent. This team has gone through similar ebbs and flows and then just turned it on in the postseason before. So it's not like we've never seen Denver do this. It's kind of their MO.
We are scarred by them.
We are scarred by them to constantly. I mean, it's funny because it's become a running joke that the Jokic era Nuggets have never won 10 games in a row. Even though every terrible team in the NBA seems to be able to do this, the Nuggets can't. And it's just kind of a symptom of who they are. Some of this has to do with defense is the hard part for them. And I think it's easy to win in the regular season with great defense. So I think there's something to that. But the other thing and the more important thing that gives me confidence is that the Nuggets are still plus 24 net rating with Jokic, AG, and Jamal Murray in under 300 minutes, which is just insane. They still are great when they have their guys. And there's just this weird thing about how we haven't seen it. I do think we're going to see it a lot. It makes sense. When I was talking about the run was going to start this week, and it sort of did with the Philly game, you kind of forget to factor in that AG is just not going to play in the games that are the back-to-backs, of which there's only one more. But I historical precedent and the fact that the actual Nuggets who will be playing in the playoffs are more dominant than ever. And we just have to hope that that version of them really does scale from 300 minutes to 1,000 and it'll be just fine, which I actually do believe.
I do too. And I mean, I wouldn't be crossing 8 time zones for the 3rd time if I don't have trust in this team. Like,
well, you did book the flight a while ago.
I did. Well, here's the thing, man. I always book the flight in November. This time around, I waited until January. Ooh. So that says something. Like, okay. I wanted a bigger sample, even though they were amazing in October and November. I still waited until January, and I said, yeah, this looks fine. I think that was when Joker came back. Was it? When did he? No, that was actually literally 2 days before he got injured. This is when I bought the tickets, and I was like, oh my god! But luckily, everything went well. So
hold on, let me bring up this one point. When I keep talking about toughness, here's why: the Nuggets came back from 3-1 twice. The Nuggets got tied because Devin Booker did not miss a shot for 4 games. They were at a 2-2 break against the Phoenix Suns. But there was no point where I felt bad about them because I was like, this team is so tough. And then you go 1-1 against the Miami Heat, who kept, creeping up on everyone. It felt like, oh my God, are they going to creep on Denver just like they creeped up on Boston and everyone else? And I never felt that way because I was like, no, Miami's only strength is their connection and their toughness. Denver can match them there, and they're just way more talented. So I'm not worried about it. Right now, I just can't hang my hat on that. So I do worry, like, how will this team respond if they get into the first round and they're down 2-1? What is that like for them? In years past, I would say, oh, they can handle that. This year, I'm just not sure. I wish I could say with a little bit more confidence that I know how they would handle that situation.
Yeah, and I wish they would be more matchups in the first round we would feel great about. But we'll talk about it when we get there. So with all this optimism, I think we are generating again. I made up a game saying that let's pretend the Nuggets are going to play in 4 playoff series this season, meaning they'll go all the way to the finals. What will be your over-unders for the following things?
Oh, man.
What will be the number of series Jonas Valanciunas plays in every game of that series? I'll put the over-under at 1.5.
So how many series would he play?
So four series total. How
Yeah.
many of those would he play in all games from that series?
I don't see him playing against the Thunder, and it's likely that Denver would play in that series. I don't see him playing against the Spurs, and I see Denver playing in that one. When you go to the finals, the only series I could see them playing is if they played against Cleveland. Then I think he has a role in that one. I don't think Cleveland's coming out of the East, so I'm going to say not that one as well. But there's a chance, just depending on who it is that makes it out. You could even make a case that against Detroit. I don't think Detroit's coming out either. So, But you could make a case against them he would play. And then when you go to the first round, maybe against Houston. You know, Houston goes with Capella. They play traditional bigs. They don't shoot the ball very well, so I think you're less worried about pick and roll scrambling on the backside. I think he would play in that series. I think against Minnesota, there's a chance he would play against that one as well because they have some size and physicality that I think Denver would have to match. I don't know that he would play against the Lakers. So to me, I guess 1.5. I'll take the under. I think there's one series and it's likely the first round.
I think you're correct there. Question number 2. The number of series the Nuggets start their opening night starting 5 in all games of the series. I'll put it at 2.5.
I would say 4. I would say over. I would take the over because I just don't know if Denver's going to disrupt that unless it's really dire. And if they're really getting killed. I think more likely is that you have a sub 3-4 minutes into the game. But Denver starters are really good, and I don't really think that they have an issue of starting games necessarily, and I don't think it's like a risk where I'd be like, man, if you start this guy, you're going to be down 10 points. I think Denver's starting lineup is good enough as is that they shouldn't fall into that. The real question is more about closing, and that's the one where I do think we're going to see different closing lineups in this playoffs.
Okay, a bit of a darker question, but remember, we are in the finals, so that's not too bad. How many blowout losses do the Nuggets concede en route to the finals? So in first 3 series, I'll put it at 4.5.
Man, to me, it's en route. So just the first 3 series. To me, this is the sneaky part about the Jokic era is that they get blown out a lot. I mean, they kind of do. Twice against Minnesota, twice against OKC.
Yeah.
And then if you just go back even before that, they've had series where they get killed and it's just like they let go of the rope or whatever. I think this has to do with a couple things. One is the cerebral aspect we're talking about. Early in series, teams throw a curveball. Denver's not prepared. They go to the drawing board and they figure it out. I'm going to say once in each series, twice in one series. That's 4 times. I think 4 times they get blown out, assuming they make it all to the finals.
That's an under, man. That's optimism for you, fellas. That's optimism. Under on blowout losses, which you see, I put those markers in right positions, right? It's not like I
4.5 is good because my next guess would have been 5. So I think you're right. Not 3, but 5.
Exactly. Okay, before I let you go and work more, I guess, I wanted to ask you something about what we talked about just before the show. And that's I'm online too much. Honestly, I should be less online on Twitter, especially. And what I'm seeing right now is sort of a civil war between the Nuggets fans because we have a certain number of fans who are still optimistic and certain number of fans who are pessimistic. And you even can say there is this dynamic of people who are pessimistic are accusing other fans who are not pessimistic enough, like not asking for coach's head and stuff like that. How do you feel about the whole dynamics of Nuggets fandom right now?
I mean, it's this is kind of the way the world has gone, like everything is a civil war. Every group gets separated into your little algorithms, and then those algorithms have to cannibalize themselves. It's something I notice, and I'm very cognizant of with my own behavior is, like I use Twitter less than ever. I tweet less than ever. And it's because my mentions over time have become, they're not enjoyable. It used to be a place I get to talk hoops with a lot of people. Most people who reply to me nowadays are just like mad at me, or mad at something I said where I'm like, it's honestly made me make less content over time, which is probably something I just have to sort out anyway, but it does grind you down over time. And so I'm not surprised by it. I think there's something about sports that are fun, that everybody gets to have an opinion and this or that, but it is like the fun of it does get sucked out a lot. And maybe I contributed to it a little bit last night, and that's what people were so bothered by, is that last night was such a concerning loss for me that I share a level of concern that, kind of kills the vibe or ruins the mood for some people. But to answer your question, yes, I see it. And it is a bummer because I think the best way to access sports is to have a point of view, have an opinion, but also to kind of accept whatever the circumstance is and say, okay, what's the story? It's like, okay, well, that's an interesting story. It's not the one I wanted, but it's an interesting story, and I'm curious how this story will play out. The Nuggets have not been tough or connected, and they've been hurt, and they faced adversity and haven't overcome it and all this stuff. That's the story. And now the question is, what does it look like for them to overcome that where they are now and win? And I wish it was easier path. I wish it was a little more enjoyable along the way, but that's the story we have, and I'm still hopeful and even somewhat optimistic that they will figure it out.
So I don't know how many people listening to this are interested in this question, but it's really interesting to me. So I'm just going to ask you, it's my show. What you going to do, people? So what you did last night was an honest opinion.
Yeah.
It's what you do always, because I know you very well. I know the takes you have on the shows are genuine. They are not fabricated to create some sort of result from it. How do you create this equilibrium between being honest and genuine and trying to protect your show from the outbursts out in the open?
To be honest, I put almost no thought into that. Like, I honestly just share my opinions because I think you can galaxy your brain trying to like, well, I'm going to say this to do that. Like, I never really feel that. I think that people connected with me early on and probably still do because they do sense a level of authenticity and just point of view. It's like everybody wants a point of view. And I think I can have an interesting one often enough that people still tune in. So for me, there's no consideration. And it's funny because even on All NBA, I get accused of this. Well, why didn't you talk about this game? Is it because your agenda against this team? And I'm always I had somebody arguing with me from OKC the other day about not covering an OKC game. Legs is one day where he does not work per week as Mondays. So if a great game happens on Monday, our show's Wednesday. We don't talk about Monday games. Yeah. And we didn't talk about an OKC one. And somebody was just after me over and over again. This is how your agenda, this or that. I always try to just put together the most entertaining shows. I try to put insight, be thoughtful and put insight in. And then I try to be honest. And so my takes are always honest. They're always original. They're not really influenced from this or that. And I'm never putting in context about, well, I know a truth about a thing, but I'm going to hide that from the fan base because I want them to not be hurt by it. Like that just never crosses my mind.
And by the way, when we talk about the Nuggets fans civil war, my take on it is I think it's good. I think that means that people still care. If they're all in trenches, that means everybody cares about what happens to the Nuggets, and that's a good thing. Like the last thing you want is an empty arena or empty movie theater. People just left because they felt nothing coming from it. Even if it's frustration, even if it's something that people expected more of and didn't get, being engaged, I think is still a good thing.
I think here's what I'll say, man. For me, sports are better than fiction. And this is what you have to kind of accept, and it makes the sports easier to follow when you accept it. When people fall into tribal lines, they want to be right more than they want to, just observe what happens. And in sports, the best sports movies are either not about sports, like The Natural or Sandlot, right? They're around sports but not about them, or they're based on a true story, because to make up a fictitious story, we're actually not as good as just letting it play out. The Nuggets are a story right now. It's not the one any of us asked for. We asked for a 60-win team where everything was awesome and we get to see Jokic is the greatest player ever and the team is great and all this stuff. We're not getting that story this year. But we still might get a great story that none of us expected, and that's why we tune in, and that's why it's okay to be wrong, and it's okay to just be like, well, let's see how this story plays out.
Adam, thank you for wasting your off day when it comes to the shows with me today. What's your plan for tomorrow, All NBA with Tim?
Me and Jason Timpf, yep, and I'm watching March Madness today, but then All NBA, and the Nuggets get a chance to bounce back. I hope they get Peyton Watson tomorrow, because I think it will be interesting for the team to get to do this homestand, a 3-game homestand. Is it 3 games or 2-game homestand? I can't even remember anymore. To get a little mini homestand here with their full roster.
I think 4. I think it's 4.
I don't think they're 4. I think it was going to be 4. No, the longest is the end. It's a 2-game homestand. It goes 2, then 3, then 4 to end out the year. So.
Damn you.
I know. I was looking at this. I'm like, well, there's only one back-to-back left. Everybody take a breath. And then I was like, oh, it's next Tuesday.
So dumb. So incredibly stupid.
I will say that I am going to die on this hill. I do think the NBA screwed the Nuggets with their schedule this year. It sucks that you have to use that excuse. It's like Jokic getting foul calls. It doesn't feel any better to be like, well, the refs aren't calling it. It doesn't feel any better. I do think the schedule this year, though, man, the Nuggets have to do something about it. If I was the Cronkies, I would invest a good amount of money to like some data scientists and say, figure out what happened here so I could take it to them. Because the Nuggets playing, it's not a coincidence that all of their guys have soft tissue injuries this year. They had no favors done to them.
And on that note, on the note of Cronkies investing more money into Nuggets and not fewer, that is all I've prepared for you today, my dear listener. And please take the word prepared very loosely. Be well, be safe, be kind to everybody. Call your mom. And until next week, remember that my plan is to be Nuggets forever.
Nuggets forever, baby.